Hello and welcome to my next video, and this video is about how you write your thesis proposal. And it is something I do kind of on the go very quickly, but the reason is I have several students who write now their proposals and I already saw some drafts. I cannot show you the drafts just because of the copyright issues, but I want to share with you some thoughts about how you should write your proposal. So first of all, proposal is an official document. That's why if you format your proposal, take care that it is formatted in the guidelines of your university. If you have the proposal, probably specific font, don't forget to write your topic. I have now several proposals that forgot to write their topic. They just wrote research question, and instead of your topic, that's why here you write my nice topic of the work of my life, and you do something like this. So it should be formatted correctly. Then you write who is your assumed supervisor. The topic is supervised by this person, and if it is a university professor, don't forget to write the correct title, professor, doctor, and so on. If it is FH, so Fachhochschulprofessor, then FH minus professor, and so on. Just some formalities that will have impact on the perception of your document. And then you of course write your matriculation number if you have one, and your name, and the other stuff that should be there. So that's why check the formalities, they should be there. Then in the next part, of course, you can make a table of contents and so on. It's up to you. If it is required, do it. But I want to focus on the structure. And the first what we have is the introduction. Sorry, I'm putting typos. Introduction. And in the introduction, you have to have 3.5 paragraphs. Actually 3 paragraphs, but I also say that you have to add one more. You start with the first paragraph that is not really required but will really help you. The first paragraph is the hook. I want you to make your reader to pay attention to what you do and why it is important. And I'll show you in a second how you do it. Before you start with any proposal, anything else, you make a new document in Word and you write your story, what you want to say with your proposal within 3 to 5 sentences. Try to put it into 3. For instance, dynamic capabilities are one of the crucial concepts in the field of strategic management, and they are important in terms of the growing environmental dynamism. Yet knowing a lot about the concept, managers still make mistakes. I assume for your proposal, I assume, if you write your thesis, it will be already what you know. I assume these are the emotions of managers that make them fail in the evaluation of emerging trends on the market. And if you have this story, always stick to it, because you have always to check whether what you write is still in line with your message. This is the message for the whole proposal. So those people who read through your proposal should have exactly this message. Then we come to introduction. The first one is the hook. What can be the hook? Usually for the proposals, as well as for the thesis, we expect you to cite academic literature, peer-reviewed journals. Sometimes book would be permissible, especially if it's about the basic concepts where you have to explain something, and other stuff, just avoid them. But in this paragraph, the first one, the hook, you can also cite newspapers, and you can cite consultancy reports like, I don't know, BCG or Ernst & Young or McKinsey or PwC reports, where they show something that is, they're usually much quicker in what they do. They investigated trends and they publish something on the trends. It's not academic, but it is descriptive statistic that show that, let's say, longevity is a problem because personnel is aging and we don't know what to do with it. It means once within the next 10, 15 years, we'll have no young people willing to apply for the job, and we'll have a lot of old people who will not be able to cope with technology. So some of the hooks example from my previous work, where 70% of digitization projects fail. It is already a hook. Or the gender pay gap in Austria and in Europe is still at the level of so and so much. And the research by somebody, Smith and colleagues, showed that females are largely underrepresented in top managerial positions and that stuff. So the thing that will draw attention, but exactly to your topic, if you write about dynamic capabilities, right, although dynamic capabilities are already almost 30 years old concept on the market, and firms and managers know about it and are educated about it, still so and so many companies cannot cope with the dynamics of the environment. These statistics by Statista Austria or by BCG Group showed that so and so many firms, top firms, they failed and didn't manage to cope with the new trends and so on. So usually it's about 4 or 5 sentences that are the introduction to pay attention to what you do. So the first, you start with a hook. Here come the 3 most important paragraphs in the introduction. First one shall give the answer to the question, what do we know about it? About it, means about your topic. We know that dynamic capabilities were defined in 1994 by Thies and colleagues, Thies and Pisano. In 1997, they make it more precise, and in 2007, they introduced the structure of dynamic capabilities, that they should rely on 3 pillars: sensing capacity, seizing capacity, and reconfiguration capacity. At the same time, and then actually what we know about the topic, you write about what we also know. And Wong and Ahmed, they wrote about something else. And then we can cite Petrov and Di Stefano and say that they see the nature of dynamic capabilities differently, but still it is dynamic capability, doesn't matter, are these routines or heuristics and so on. So you write what we know about it. And then you make a nice transition and go to the next paragraph is, what don't we know about it? And you make a transition in a way like, for instance, Di Stefano and Petrov, they said that there are different natures of dynamic capability. This can be routines, as suggested by Thies, or heuristic, as suggested by Eisenhardt Martin. And then we know to what we don't know. But we don't know why some firms rely on heuristics while the others rely on routines. We don't know why some of them become more successful and quicker in their decisions while the others do not, although they have this capability. They developed processes, they have departments for it, they have routines for it, but still they do not succeed. Is actually, and then you go to your research question and you finalize the second paragraph with your research question. So therefore, I posit the research question, which is, what is the impact of emotions on dynamic managerial capabilities? Remember, dynamic managerial capabilities are not dynamic capabilities. This is a sub-concept which focuses on the capabilities of managers to cope with change. So, emotions. What is the impact? And then we get to the last paragraph. How can we get there? How can we answer the research question? In order to answer this research question, in my thesis, I plan to run an experimental study. I plan to make a between-group experimental design, a study with a between-group experimental design to find out what is the impact of positive and negative emotions on the ability of managers to cope with change. For this, I plan to design an online experiment and so on. And this is the last paragraph that will actually lead to the explanation later to the next chapter, which is the theoretical background. Theoretical background. And this will be our next subchapter. For the introduction, you need about 1 page. Don't make it longer, but don't make it too short. You need really to have a hook. It's recommended. You have to show that you know literature and at least make it interesting. You don't have to reflect on everything. For this, you have theoretical background. You have to show that we don't know something and there are some research gaps and there is a research question resulting from this research gap. Because what we don't know about it is exactly the research gap. And how can we get there is about how you want to approach it in your thesis. Then we come to theoretical background, and here pay attention. What my students often do, they write about strategic quality management. It's fine, and then they start, but they start with the telling me the history of strategic quality management or telling me definitions and so on. It's good if you define something like dynamic capabilities, which are the capability of an organization to cope with change. So definition within one sentence is okay. But if a student spends a whole page explaining me the history of dynamic capabilities or history of strategic quality management or history of different types of thinking, system 1, system 2 thinking, it's not what I want to have. Look at your story. Is there something where you address the history of dynamic capabilities? No, you just say they're crucial concept. So what you have to focus immediately is dynamic capabilities and their role for the success of strategy. So most likely you will have to have a subsection, and this section will be dynamic capabilities and their relation to a firm's success. And you dive into this section with a kind of assuming that people know. If they don't know, you define it within the same sentence. So as we know, dynamic capabilities were initially meant as the capabilities that explain how firms can become dynamic. And here you find a lot of literature, but do not list literature like Smith et al. Said this and Meyer et al. Said that. No, it's boring, not interesting, and doesn't make a good flow, doesn't make a good story. The story means you have to continue a story. Okay, so we don't know something about it, but what do we know? Here you expand your paragraph number 2. What do we know about it? Dynamic capabilities were there from 1994 in the initial paper. In 1970s, indeed made it more precise and explained what they are. And for instance, he showed this and that, or they showed. There were 3 authors. The other authors coped on this concept, but suggested different alternative concepts like change management. Why should we have dynamic capabilities if we have change management? For instance, Arendt and Bromley, 2009, wrote about it. And then you write about how it evolved and how it is related to the concept, because it was not change management is better than dynamic capabilities. They said that change management can better explain success of firms than dynamic capabilities do. That is why you always write about what you want to write about. And don't forget that your topic are the emotions, so you should come to the concept of dynamic managerial capabilities. So in the, second, third paragraph here, you write, while Thies and his followers, and there were a lot of papers who cited Thies and mainly relied on Thies, they focused on organizational routines and processes. Some people said that managers matter, that managers play a huge role. A manager can stop a process, can invent a new process, can change a process. It means the capability of a manager to cope with change is of crucial importance too. And here you come to the concept slowly of dynamic managerial capabilities, which will be somewhere here, and we have some text here, and then you have the second one is dynamic managerial capabilities. And here we go. And the initial concept, initially it came from, I think, in 2007 by Simon and Hitt, I think they wrote, not Simon and Hitt, Sermon and Hitt wrote a paper about dynamic managerial capabilities, where they compared similar organizations, but showed while having similar resources, they came up with different results. So it is, if it is not about the resources, organizational resources, it's about management. So it kind of, then we had a paper from Adler and Helfer 2003, who said that dynamic managerial capabilities should be there. They should explain something, and so on. Actually, Adler and Helfer, they wrote in 2003, so Sermon and Hitt in 2009. And a recent paper by, it was Jeffrey Martin and I think it was Petrov and Martin 2014. They wrote about dynamic managerial capabilities in overview. So this is your coping point. And then you can say, by the way, Bogodistov, I also wrote my dissertation about it, showed that emotions of managers matter, because those managers who were in a certain type of emotions, positive or negative emotions, they show different results of their work, they show different performance. Then you continue evolving it until you get to the last point where you say, and here is actually what I want to do, I want to manipulate my emotions. Now regarding theories, watch my video on the theories. I recommend using one theory because it is the most secure and most safe way, plus it is the most focused way, will help you a lot if you focus on one theory. I say to my students that there are only 2 exceptions where you should not have one theory. The first one is you have competing theories. Theory A says it will have positive impact on performance, and theory B says it will have negative impact on performance. and I want to see which one of them is true. Then you could have two theories. And in this event, you can make a kind of competing theories test, but it's kind of a bit boring. Okay, you will find out this one was correct. So what? So kind of, we knew, they already postulated it should be correct. The second approach where you need more than one theory is if you want to extend the theory. You say there is the dynamic capabilities view, but it can be extended through another theory. And I do not recommend doing this. Some students still try because the theories have different assumptions. Some of them assume the rationality factors and some bounded rationality. Some of them assume that the unit of analysis is organization, and they take the theory which is from the individual level, from cognitive psychology, and it doesn't work anymore. So it kind of, you have to be very careful about it. You can take job demands and resources models, organizational one, but it has nothing to do with strategy. And extending dynamic capabilities view with job demands and resources model is a kind of trying to compare apples with oranges or extend apples with oranges. So it makes not so much sense. That's why I stick to one theory and build it all around one theory. And dynamic capabilities view says that something, yet we still don't know how managers act that they perceive, for instance, the prospect. Is it a positively formulated information or negatively formulated information? And we made and still make an interesting study with a doctoral student of mine where we look at dynamic capabilities and see whether the positive frame or negative frame has impact. For instance, imagine, I can tell you that 10% of companies, they fail within the dynamic capabilities. And then I ask you about how would you develop your capabilities. And the other managers, some experimental group, will see 90% of people succeed with their dynamic, or organizations succeed with their dynamic capabilities. It is the same number, you have 100%. I just focused their attention on 90% successful or 10% failure. And as we have shown in our research, this small thing impacts their actions and how they want to develop, how they want to design their dynamic capabilities. And this is how you come to your, finally, what you will have dynamic capability, managerial capabilities. Then you have here 3, it will be emotions and managerial capability to cope with change, and this will be the last subsection here. And after this one, I come to the research model. And research model is where you postulate your hypothesis. I assume you will have some. I write it more or less for the quantitative research. In qualitative research, you would have a completely different logic of thinking. Research model, don't forget to depict your research model. Make a nice picture. What you want to do is mediation, moderation. I have again the video on how you build a research model. Please watch it before you continue, and write here down your hypothesis. So for the proposal, it's sufficient. In your thesis, you will have to write a theory for each hypothesis, but in this event, you can kind of simply summarize, because we talk now about the document that has 3 to 10 pages. Some universities say 3 pages, some say 5 pages, something 10 pages. The good thing is whatever you write here, to the best of my knowledge, can be used in your thesis. That is why it's not self-plagiarism, because what you invest now into your theory research, you will use in your thesis. That's why don't be afraid if you need to write more. Imagine it is your thesis. You will anyway have to read through these articles, through these book chapters, understand what happens there depicted, so you can use it also here. Research model, and you have here hypothesis. I recommend usually 1 to 3, not more. Some professors from our business school recommend 5 or more hypotheses, 5 to 7, but always think about, don't make it too complex. If you come up with 3 hypotheses, it's a good way to go, good number. And depict the research model. So then we come to the next point, which is the methodology. And here you cannot have the methodology right now because you are just writing the proposal. You plan to have something, but here write about your plan. To address the issues, the hypothesis, the research question I mentioned, I decided to go for an experimental design between subjects or between group randomized experiment. This is what I want to do. In this event, I want to introduce a manipulation. This manipulation will be a positive video and a negative video that are pre-tested and come from the paper, so and so, or will be pre-tested as I am developing them on my own. For this, I have to run a pre-study. In a pre-study, we'll test that the videos work. And in the main study, I will introduce the video as a manipulation and then ask people questions about their dynamic managerial capabilities. And by the way, we published recently a paper with a questionnaire about dynamic managerial capabilities. So you can just simply use this questionnaire and refer to this paper. So whatever you're using, don't forget the references, it should be there. And Methodology, and at the end of the methodology, in the proposal, you write how you plan to analyze your results. I plan to run the ANOVA analysis as I'm going to compare two groups: anger versus fear as two negative emotions, and the control group, and the result of managers reporting their dynamic managerial capabilities. Or I plan a mediation model. That is why I need to run a regression based on Karen and Baron and Kenny approach. So it will be 3 regressions that you need to run in order to state that you have a mediation for regressions. Or I decided to run a Zobel test to test for the mediation, so on. Or I decided to run a structure equation model in SPSS AMOS and do this in the following way. So here you describe. What you can also mention here is how you operationalize your concept. So this will be the 2 emotion time manipulator, do it using video, or autobiographic memory task, or that you use the questionnaire from the paper, so on, so that you want to change it, extend it, so you write it there. And finally, don't forget to write about your control variables, as I assume that the effects can be explained not only by emotions, but also, let's say, by the experience of the managers, by the way of thinking and so on. That's why I include also the control variables of age, of experience, of gender, and whatever can be the alternative explanation that will show that you want to proceed it. And actually that was it. Then you can come to references. At our university, we also ask students to write the time plan. And then you can show what is the plan, what is the first phase, when you plan to be done with the literature analysis, when you plan to be done with your experimental design, when you plan to collect data analysis, and the final thesis writing. And if you don't know how to make it nice, you can just write it down. But I can recommend you the Gantt project bits. It's the simple free tool. Gantt project, I think this. Let's see if I'm right. Yes. And you can download it for free, but they also ask you for a donation. But if you go to download, then you have somewhere here, just a second, the commercials. Here, you can have the donation, and the donation will go to the Ukrainian army as far as I know, but you can also make a free download if you don't want to donate. And in this event, you get a tool that will help you make a nice design, a nice graph on how you want to make a project. It really produces cool graphs. If you go to support, I think they have the video where they show how you develop a Gantt chart, and they really look great. So it can look like, no, I think it's the commercial what I clicked on, so we don't want to go there. I just went to the wrong one. I don't see it, but I think it was somewhere they had a Gantt video project tutorial, and you can see how they will kind of graphs they can develop there. So I think it's now commercial coming. That's why I'm going to. Okay, let's go to the commercial.
Unterstütze deine gesunde Verdauung mit Activia. Activia ist anders. Es enthält doppelt so viele Joghurtkulturen wie.
So, and let's show you how it will look like at the end, how it can look like. Let's go to this video.
We're going to look at that weekends are.
And this is how your timeline could look like. It's very professional. You can export a PDF and make a nice picture with your resources involved, with other stuff, with the project that you have there. So these are the resources, these are the projects, and you can have something like this. So this looks really professional. So then you go to references. In the references, don't forget it should be well cited. In our event, it should be in German DGP, in American or English APA, American Psychology Association style. That's what we rely on at our university, but you may have your universities check that the pages are there, that the the publisher is mentioned if it is a book and so on, so that you don't have to send small mistakes where people will think that you didn't pay attention to your work. Try to use more of peer-reviewed journals and try to use good journals. Go to the rankings. There are different ones. If you are not from Europe, it will be ABS rank, Association of Business Schools, I think. If you are in Germany or a German-speaking country, go for VHB rank. Go to the website and check that the journals are good before you cite something that we just had. Some presentations from journals that look so fancy, or the journal will go on the website and they write it 2 days review, and for 500 rupees we publish a paper. So it's not the papers you would like to cite, especially in the proposal where you build the core of your research, you will build upon it. And if you make bad papers, most likely have bad theory and then bad results. And by the way, I had already students who took questionnaires from bad papers and bad journals and they were dissatisfied with the analysis, but I said, why are you dissatisfied? You made a perfect replication of a bad scale. They presented the same bad results. You did it in the same way, so why should you be dissatisfied? You should have selected something better, and then you could be dissatisfied. In this event, there is no reason to be dissatisfied. Finally, I want to pay your attention to how you write a paragraph. One paragraph is one thought, and all the thoughts, all this section should go in line with your story. If a paragraph that you write is not about the story, if you write about, and by the way, absorptive capacities are also part of dynamic capability of the paper. Do you see somewhere in this story that I need absorptive capacities, need to make this sideshow? Or in German, Kriegsnebenschauplats. So do we need to have something that is not related? No, we don't want to have it. Just delete it, make it nice and flow, make it shorter but more precise, make it something that you want to read. So each section has a transition to the next section. You end the first introduction with a kind of transition to your theory that you need to know more. And here's the theory, and this is the first subsection, dynamic capabilities. I don't write about the history, I write about why it is related to performance and how manager thinks and how they decide. And then that actually it is dynamic managerial capability, sub-concept that plays a huge role here. And then I slowly move to that managers have their limitation, they have the bounded rationality issue. And that is why I need to move to the some of the way where emotions are introduced, because emotions have impact. And this is how I come to this story, and this is how I want to measure it, and these are the expected results. Within each paragraph, the same, you have an introduction to your thoughts. Then you have the thought itself, then you have the transition to the next thought. So each paragraph should be related. If you have the, strategic quality management in the last sentence of the paragraph, then the next sentence is right. By the way, strategic quality management is one of the concepts that has tools that can allow us to measure what we actually want to measure and so on. That you have constant this transition. Then you have a nice flow. And if something doesn't fit your story or doesn't fit the flow, delete it or rewrite it. Always avoid this listening, these paragraphs, 2-sentence paragraphs, and Smith et al. Said this one, next paragraph, and Meyer et al. Said this one. We don't want to say what I know what they said. We want to see a reflection on it. And Smith said this one. This contradicts to the Meyer et al. That is why I see that Meyer actually addressed the individual level and Smith addressed the organization level. This could explain when I have the difference in views. And that is why we need to look at Meyering et al. In 2007, who actually tried to connect both levels at a meta level. And the next section is about the meta level of an organization and then you continue writing. Then you will have a good proposal. So if you just follow this guideline, I think you will have already something that you can show to your supervisor, where you can really show that you have an idea, that this idea matters, that there are things that we know about it, but also things that we don't know about it. It means there is a research gap and there is a research question addressing this research gap, and you know how to do it. In detail, you explain why it should be within this theory, why should it happen, or why it should not be the case. What does this theory say? Remember, different theories can explain the same relationship in different ways. That's why focus on one theory and do it. If you don't know how to do it, watch my video on the theory and how to select one theory. Then research model, depicting it, then methodology. This is what I want to do. I want to run experimental study, or I want to run a survey study. I want to run whatever you want to run. And at the end, you will have timeline. Timeline is optional, but our university wants to have a timeline. And then you have the references. I hope it will help you. Wish you good luck with your proposals, and see you next time.